Ladies and gentlemen, Bitcoin is in a very weird situation. It's in a situation where the charts are all leaning bearish, but the narratives are actually all leaning bullish. We have the ETF narrative, which is overall bullish. We have the halving narrative, which is overall bullish as well. And that halving is just under 3 months away. So the problem with Bitcoin right now is the charts are leaning bearish, but there's no narrative to convince people to sell. And that bounce from 38.5K was actually quite convincing. So although from a charting perspective, the lower targets remain very much on the table, the narrative perspective is telling a different story. We need to weigh those perspectives and come to the conclusion on which one we need to trust more. We're also giving you invalidation zones for each scenario because the bear case and the bull case are both possible, one of which is more likely and one of which is more convincing right now, but that doesn't mean the other one is not going to happen, right? Unfortunately, like anything, financial markets are nuanced, right? I know people want straight answers. We're going to go up or we're going to go down. But unfortunately, it's not that simple when you're in the middle of a range just before a macro cyclical trigger from the halving. So ladies and gentlemen, I'll try my best to keep it as short and concise as possible, but it is a nuanced topic today, so we need to discuss it in its full length. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get into it. Before we dive straight into the charts today, let's check out the VIP group on Telegram just for 15 seconds here. The VIP group on Telegram will give you altcoin trading signals, direct buy, sell, take profits, stop loss signals, etc. You'll chart them up as per the information and you'll trade the coins. We have a 78.52% win rate on our posted signals. Fully transparent trading results. You can see the PDF there, and that gives you an idea of what profits you can achieve in the group. We also have a 24/7 group chat where we post messages, 120 members in there, daily, 24/7 about news, market events, whatever it may be, charts, coins they want you to buy, whatever. And you can check it all out there. It's very useful. Join the community there on Telegram. You can check out the payment information in that group. It's all in the description below. Without further ado, let's get into the content. Now, upon further inspection, I don't think this video will be too long. I have a few key points I want to make, and I think they're actually quite simple. Again, some people don't like nuance, okay? I've found that to be the case over the course of my YouTube career here in cryptocurrency, but the fact of the matter is the charts are always nuanced unless there is a clear rejection like there was here at 48 to 53K, which we listed as a clear rejection. We're claiming that clear rejection was coming for weeks on end, and it did come. And unless there's a clear breakout from 38.5, a clear breakout from 32, all these things were clearly predicted. But when you're in the middle of a range, unfortunately, it gets a little bit nuanced. And we need to discuss the nuance, right? And I'm going to start by discussing where we are and what the trend is currently, okay? So where are we? Well, we have a macro range in green. We have a macro range here between green and red. Support down at 38.5K. Resistance up here at 49K. We're in between that macro range. We've got various lines. These yellow lines represent diagonal structures. We've got a triangle formation here. We'll speak about that in a second. The fact of the matter is, though, Bitcoin has broken into a downwards trend. This is something we've discussed relentlessly over the past couple of weeks, really, or week or so, I should say. We had an upwards trend for the longest time. We had an upwards trend for 4.5 months, just continued higher lows and higher highs on Bitcoin. But unfortunately, we broke the equal low here at 40K. We went downwards into an upwards trend, and now what we're seeing right now could be described as a lower high, okay? And unless it goes up to 49K, that will be the case. Unless this move breaks above 49K, unfortunately, on a daily chart perspective, this move will be listed as a lower high because we saw a lower low. So Bitcoin on the daily chart is kind of screwed, for lack of a better word, in that sense, from a trend perspective. But from a structural perspective, it doesn't look too bad. We'll speak about that in a second. The trend on Bitcoin on the daily chart is very clearly bearish, and it will be for a while. What about the monthly chart? Well, the monthly chart is technically an upwards trend, but we've just seen a very bearish, in my opinion, doji candle. Now, a doji candle generally occurs at the top of uptrends or at the bottom of downtrends. It's a reversal candle. Now, with that said, this candle did occur with a clean wick to 49K, which was expected, and a clean wick to 38.5K, which was expected. So it's actually a very expected ranging candle, but overall, we cannot deny that it's a bearish candlestick formation, and that means the monthly chart as well is leaning slightly, I'll say slightly bearish. So bearish daily chart, definitively, from a trend perspective. From a monthly chart perspective, the trend is actually bullish, but it's leaning bearish now, so bearish monthly chart. And from a weekly chart perspective, we have two very clear lines. We have a line here at 43.8K, which is a very strong resistance line. We've tested it for resistance on multiple occasions and rejected every time. And then we have a support line here at 41.3K, which is a support zone. We've bounced off it many times as well. So we've got this clear range in the weekly chart, and in order for us to actually be bullish, right, we need to break a clear weekly candle close above 43.8K. So right now, we basically have a neutral weekly chart, leaning bearish really, because we're at the top of an upwards trend and we've seen consolidation. So slightly bearish weekly chart, slightly bearish monthly chart, and quite bearish daily chart. Now, obviously, when you have 3 different time frames, and not only 3 different time frames, but 3 of the major time frames, daily, weekly, and monthly chart, all at least leaning slightly bearish, and one of them leaning quite bearish, you have to consider downside targets. There's no way around that. You just have to. You need to consider the trends, and you need to trust the trends to some extent. Now, I'm not saying that everything relies on trends, and we're going to get into a nuanced perspective in a second, but the fact of the matter is the trends right now are very clearly on an overall scale leaning bearish, which means we need to at least consider the lower targets. Now, without, wasting your time going into the specifics of those targets, I've done that so many times. You can watch any one of my last videos basically in the last week, and I've gone over those targets very clearly. Just go click on any of these. But the targets essentially are, what are the targets below 38.5k? Well, as listed from 49k at the very top, my targets have not changed, by the way. My first target was 38.5k. We reached my first target. My first target was reached, right? Predicted the rejection, we reached the first target. Second target, 35k. Third target, 32. Fourth target, 28. Now you might be thinking, oh, 28, that's ridiculous. And it is, right? 28 is a pessimistic target. I don't expect it to be reached. In fact, I think it's very likely it won't be reached. I actually don't think we'll go that low on Bitcoin. But technically speaking, there are trends that, not trends, but there are, I guess, forms of analysis that I've discussed in the past that would indicate it's a possibility and it would not damage the cyclical structure. So I'm leaving it on there just for the sake of having it on there for clarity. But overall, what are the actual targets? 35, 32. 28's on the table, but it's not very likely, right? So those are the lower targets. So what we've identified so far, then we'll move forward into the more nuanced perspective, right? Is that we have a very clear trend, on all time frames, generally speaking, leaning bearish, okay? And with bearish trends, we need to consider lower targets. The lower targets are 35, 32, 28. So we need to consider those targets because they're still valid. We are not at all out of the woods here for Bitcoin. In fact, with bearish trends, I'm compelled as an analyst to lean bearish. And so technically speaking, I'm leaning bearish right now, right? And I do lean bearish, right? Because we've got bearish trends, therefore I lean bearish. I'm an analyst. I'm macro trader. This is what we do here. But with that said, it's not that simple, right? Because you can be bearish all the way up to one point, and then on the second we get a weekly candle close above, right, 43.8k, the charts can flip bullish. So I'm not sitting here today before I defend the bull case, saying that I'm bullish. I'm not. I'm leaning bearish because the trends are bearish. I am saying that we could very easily flip bullish. It wouldn't take much. All it would take is a weekly candle close above 43.8k. Because if we get a weekly candle close above 43.8k, what happens? It means the weekly chart flips definitively bullish. And that means we have a definitively bearish chart and a definitively bullish chart, and then only a slightly bearish monthly chart, which is not enough to make any definitive conclusions on Bitcoin. So I would say very clearly, and I've repeated this point, and I'll repeat it again here today, but then I'll get into a more nuanced argument, that 43.8k, a weekly candle close above that level in 2 days and 17 hours would actually invalidate the bearish targets, for the time being at least, okay? But I'll go further, and I'll speak about the bull case in a bit more extent here. I think that the bull case is not particularly unlikely. As much as I am bearish here, and as much as I think the lower targets are valid, I actually don't even think they're valid. They're objectively valid because we haven't broken the downwards trend yet. I do understand that there's actually quite a likely possibility that Bitcoin could go upwards, and the reasoning behind that is not TA based, and this is why it's hard to get into. This is why I've constantly used the word nuance in this video. The reality for Bitcoin is this, and I've been thinking about this today, and I spoke to Mega Well Crypto about it. Bitcoin has had a narrative that has dragged it up the entire time, right? So we had the 4-year cycle narrative that essentially led to the bottom. In November, we bottomed out as per the 4-year cycle. Okay, we also had the S&P bottoming a month before, and we went upwards a lot. We got to the doorstep of 32k, which is a major resistance zone. We kind of were moving too fast at that point, so Bitcoin took its time. We then had ETF news kind of spiking upwards here around September, and throughout this entire move upwards, which was exacerbated massively to the upside, we went upwards too high there, as per TA at least. The ETF narrative kept the sellers from selling. No one was selling, right? Everyone was buying. No one was selling. The price didn't go down. Now, the ETF narrative turned into an ETF reality, and obviously narratives are stronger than realities, and so we saw a drop down because of that. And now we've dropped down, it was 21%. We reached 38.5k. It was my first target, and now we've kind of bounced quite strongly from 38.5k. All right, the trends are still bearish, as I've said. The bearish targets are still valid, as I've said. There's going to be so many people in the comments who, misunderstand me here. I'm trying my best to remain consistent while also, assessing the nuance. The fact of the matter is, there's no bearish narrative anymore. And that's something that's quite concerning me as I keep talking about these bearish targets. I do still think they are valid because of the bearish downtrends, and I do still think they are valid because Bitcoin is objectively too high for this part of the cycle. But the problem is there's no bearish narrative anymore, right? Everyone knows that the halving is in less than 2.5 months. Everyone knows that. And just in the same way that everyone knew that the ETF was going to be bullish, everyone knew the ETF was going to be approved, right? So everyone knew it was going to be approved. They were waiting for it to be approved, and so they didn't sell. That was a narrative that kept Bitcoin elevated in the sky for close to 3 months, okay? The halving is objectively much bigger than the ETF. And now that we've seen a drop down to 38.5K, and we've bounced off of it right now, and I analyze the scenario and I see, wait a second, there's no more bearish narrative. Why would people actually sell right now? Now, I understand that people don't really need a reason to sell. People, sell as per emotions or whatever it may be, or TA actually does work, believe it or not. It's not just astrology, but at the same time, it does help to have a narrative, and I can't really see a narrative right now. Maybe rate decreases, but I don't think they'll be coming this month. It's hard to piece together what the bearish narrative will be. I can understand what it would have been down here at 28K to 32K, and this is why this first rejection and second rejection were actually predicted by me. I predicted them very clearly. You can check out my track record on my featured video. I predicted both of those rejections, and I also predicted that we would bottom here and go upwards, even though we had a M formation forming, a double top formation forming. And that was because I believe that the S&P 500 dragging down Bitcoin narrative was still strong enough. I believe that a lot of people actually weren't convinced by this rally yet at that point in time. But right now, I think basically the vast majority of the market thinks Bitcoin has seen its 15K bottom. It's only taken them a year and a bit. But overall, I think most people are macro bullish on Bitcoin. And I also think that the vast majority of the market genuinely thinks that 2024 and 2025 will be bullish years, or at least 2024. And so I'm struggling, as I said, to piece together what the bearish narrative will be for people to sell right now. And when I look at this 38.5K bounce, that does bring some sort of conflict in my mind. I also look at things like the total cryptocurrency market cap. I look at the descending wedge we have forming on the total cryptocurrency market cap on a green support zone that held it up during the bull market. That was a very major support zone, right? I look at this descending wedge. I know a descending wedge is a bullish structure, and I see, okay, look, we could go downwards one more time. It's not drawn perfectly. You have to excuse me. We could go downwards one more time, but overall, eventually, we're going to break this to the upside most likely, unless we do break it to the downside, which would be an unlikely scenario. But and then you could argue the same thing. You could argue, well, this is actually a head and shoulders candlestick formation. The point is, I'm not really seeing any clear bearishness anywhere, right? Ethereum's the same, okay? Ethereum, yeah, okay, we've got a support line here that probably will break down, but we've got a major support zone laid right underneath it, a major support zone that held it up during the bull market. Who's to say we go below that? So there's a lot of veiled bearishness. There's a lot of bearish trends, but in terms of the actual structure themselves, the structure right now is a normal breakout, a normal rejection from resistance, and a normal bounce off support. The structure right now is a resistance support flip, which is bullish. So the trends and the structure are quite different. Trends are not the same as structure. Trends is how the price is moving. Higher highs, higher lows. Structure is how the price is moving in relation to resistance and support. So the structure right now I actually see on the cryptocurrency market is not that bad. The trends are pretty bad. So you can understand how it leaves me in this kind of difficult scenario. And this is why I just wanted to use this video to clarify my position here. I'm still bearish, technically. I have to be bearish. I've got no choice, right? Because the trends are bearish, and so the lower targets are objectively valid. That is the case until we get a weekly candle above 43.8K. But I'm just using this video to remind you that trends aren't everything. And in this particular scenario, given the context of the part of the cycle we're in, it is a little bit more complicated than it usually is. And that's unfortunate because we have had a very complicated year so far on Bitcoin. Last year, at least, was on Bitcoin. We had a very complex year in 2023. Lots of stuff going on with ETF. ETF narrative plagued Bitcoin for basically the last quarter of the year, essentially, from September onwards. But unfortunately, that complexity is not dying down. But look, I will say, objectively, the trends are bearish. The lower targets are still valid. I am leaning bearish because of that reasoning. And also, I will also say very clearly, and you might be thinking, oh, Wolf, why aren't you talking about this? Well, the fact of the matter is Bitcoin is overvalued for this time in the cycle. Now, that does mean something from a trend perspective, because obviously trends matter and the 4-year cycle matters. And the 4-year cycle is what I use to predict the bottom and the top within basically 2 or 3 days on each occurrence. I think it was 3 or 4 days down here in 2022. Within 2021, it was literally 12 hours. So obviously trends matter to an extent because they've worked very well for me in the past. But I'm also understanding that we are in a period of time now, unlike where we were before, where the 4-year cycle is becoming very, very well known. And I do know that narratives are very important for Bitcoin, as proven by what happened with the ETF narrative. I'm looking for a bearish narrative. Upon a bearish narrative coming up, okay, cool, we can be very confident that the price will go down. But right now, unfortunately, it is nuanced. Again, leaning bearish. Again, the bearish targets are still active until we see that weekly candle close above 43.8k. My opinion remains exactly the same. I've not shifted 1 inch on my opinion. I'm just showing you that unfortunately, it's not really as simple as it seems this time, okay? And although I might sit here and say, I'm bearish, we're going to go downwards here on YouTube channels, or I think we're going to go downwards, or the targets are still valid lower on my YouTube channel, I'm saying that within the context of a 15-minute video. And unfortunately, as I said, it's just not that simple. So I'm making that video to explain this video here to explain the nuance. The chart, it's very much a situation where the charts are showing me one thing, but I suppose logically, or the narratives, I suppose, are not really showing me what the charts are showing me. I'm kind of conflicted between the charts and kind of the narrative structure of the market right now, or the sentiment, I suppose, of the market right now. Now, obviously, charts take priority, and that's why I'm bearish still. But again, I just wanted to show that to you today. So sorry for rambling on. It is a bit of a rambly topic because it's not really backed by evidence, really. It's backed by kind of my own speculations, my own observations about the market. But again, bearish targets are still valid for now until we get that weekly candle break. I'm interested to see what you guys think about it though, because this, again, is more of an opinionated video rather than a fact-based video. So I'm interested to see what you guys think about, is there a narrative that would drag Bitcoin down here? Is there a narrative that would bring us to 35k, or is the bottom actually in? Again, I lean towards the bottom not being in because of the trend structure, the trends on Bitcoin, but the structure and the narratives themselves puts that into doubt a little bit. So again, interested to hear what you have to say. Leave a comment down below. Guys, like, comment, and subscribe. Check out the Crypto Academy's Become a Trader course if you want to learn how to trade. This will teach you everything you need to know from a charting perspective, from a fundamental perspective, from a psychology perspective, how to find trades. It's all there on the website, which you can find in the description below. And then finally, the Bingx and Bitget exchanges. If you buy and sell cryptocurrency, which all of you probably do, you need a good exchange to do so because you're trusting the exchange to keep your money safe. And you're also trusting the exchange to give you good rates, give you good fees. And both of these exchanges have good rates and good fees, and both of them have never been hacked. So they cover all bases. Bingx is global non-KYC and Bitget is global KYC minus the USA. So take your pick depending on your location and your requirements. Check them out. You get a 15% trading fee discount with my referral link in the description below. That's probably one of the best ways to help the channel. So guys, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you tomorrow. Cheers.